Imagine you're the sales manager at a growing company. Every week, you get this giant spreadsheet with thousands of rows of sales data. It's overwhelming, and there's way too much data to make sense of it just by scrolling. What you really need is a quick way to answer simple questions such as which regions are performing best, which products are driving sales, and how are things trending over time. That's exactly what a pivot table dashboard can do. This video will show you step by step how you can transform your data into an interactive and informative dashboard in Excel. So here's the data set that we're going to build our dashboard based on. And the first thing that we're going to do is place our data set inside an Excel table. So this is going to allow us to name our data set. And this is going to make it much easier to later add data and update our dashboard. So to place our data set inside an Excel table, we're just going to select any cell in our data set and go up to the Insert tab, and we've got this table command here. We can also use the keyboard shortcut Control-T. So let's click on the table command, and we're going to see this Create Table menu here. And it's got our entire data set selected. And we've also got this option here, My Table Has Headers. We're going to leave that checked because our first row here does have column headings in it. So let's press OK. And you can see that we've got an Excel table now. And when we have our active cell in our table, we've got this Table Design tab. And if we go up there, that's going to allow us to name our table. So instead of this generic name here, we can replace that with something like Sales and press Enter. And now when we create pivot tables, we're going to refer to this sales table instead of a hard-coded generic range. Now that we've got our data set inside a table, let's create the pivot tables that are going to drive our dashboard. So we can select anywhere inside of our table and go up to the Insert tab. And here we've got our pivot table commands. So let's click on that button, and we want to create a pivot table from table/range. And when we do that, you can see that Excel has selected our sales table. And next we've got the options here to add our pivot table into a new worksheet or an existing one. Here we're going to select an existing worksheet that we've got set up for our pivot tables. And so let's place our new pivot table here and press OK. And now we've got a blank pivot table. And in this pivot table, we want to summarize our sales by customer. And to do that, all we need to do is head over to our pivot table fields window here. And here I'm going to place the customer field in the rows area. And that's going to allow us to summarize our values by customer. So here we've got all our customers listed down the rows. And the values we want to summarize are our sales values. So I'm going to put that in the values area, and Excel is going to automatically sum those values for me. So here now we've got a list of our customers and their respective sales totals. Now we're going to do something similar with sales by months, sales by region, and sales by product. So here I'm just going to copy this entire pivot table. So if I select it all, press Control-C, then I can press Control-V and paste it here a few times. And so here we want sales by month. So I'm going to remove our customer field, and I'm going to add our order date field into the rows area. So now we've got a summary by month for our sales. And if we look at the rows area, Excel has actually created two new fields for us based on our order date field here. So we've got a days field and we've got a months field. Now I also want a years field, so I'm going to click on one of these values, right click, and go to the group option. And here I'm just going to add in years and press OK. And now we've got years, months, and days. And here I'm just going to remove the days. We don't need that. So now we've got a pivot table that shows our sales by year and month. Here, we're going to add in our region field to summarize by. So let's remove customer and click and drag in our region field. And now we've got a summary by region. And lastly, let's do the same thing for our products. So let's remove customer field and add in our products field into the rows area to get a summary by product. We're also going to create one last pivot table to display some summary statistics that are just going to show the overall sales and the overall average value of a sale, etc. So let's copy one of these pivot tables, Control C and Control V. And here we're not going to summarize by any field, so let's remove our region field there. And what we want to do is display the average of our sales, the minimum, the maximum, and the sum. And so we can change the aggregation type here of that sales value. If we left click on the field here and go to value field settings, then we can change this to an average. And it turns out we can actually also add our sales field into the values area multiple times. So if we click and drag sales down here, now we've also got a sum of sales and an average of sales. Here we're gonna left click and go to value field settings, and here let's switch this to a minimum. Let's add in sales again, left click, value field settings, and change that to a maximum. And add it in one last time and have a sum of sales. And we're also going to add in our quantity field here so that we can have a sum of quantity. And when we add multiple fields into the values area, you're going to notice this value field here pop up in the columns area. And that causes our values to display across the columns. But if we click and drag this down into the rows area, then these values are going to display down the rows instead. And these are the overall values that we're going to use in our data cards that we'll build later on. So in order to use these values in our data cards, we are going to have them available outside of the pivot table by referencing them here with a formula. So if we just press equals and click on, for example, the sum of quantity value, you're going to notice that it automatically creates this get pivot data reference for us. And then that's just going to be a more secure way for us to reference this value here, because if the shape of our pivot table changes, then this value is still going to reference the correct cell because of that get pivot data formula. So we can do something similar for all our other statistics here. And this way we'll be able to reference these in our data cards without worrying about our references changing accidentally. Now that we've got our pivot tables, we're going to create pivot charts based on these pivot tables. So these are going to be charts that are linked to our pivot tables, and this is what's going to be used in our dashboard. So first, let's create our pivot chart for our sales by customer. So we're just going to select inside our sales by customer pivot table. And then we're going to go up to the Insert tab, and we've got our pivot chart option here. And for our sales by customer chart, we're going to do a bar chart. And let's press OK. And now let's create our sales by month. Let's select that pivot table, go up to the Insert tab, pivot chart. And here we're going to do a line chart for this. And let's do our sales by region. Let's select that pivot table, go to Insert, Pivot Chart. And here we're going to do a column chart. Press OK. And let's select our sales by product pivot table and go to the Insert tab, Pivot Chart. And here we're also going to do a bar chart. And there we go. We've got all of our charts that are going to be in our dashboard. So we can hold the Control key and select all of them. And then press Control X to cut them and place them in our dashboard sheet with Control V. And then we're going to place our charts where we want them in our dashboard, and we can resize them. And so we can click and drag the corners of our charts to resize them to the desired place. Now, the default pivot charts don't look that great, so we're going to spend a bit of time to format these. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sort these so that we can easily see which products have the most sales or which customers have the most sales. So here we've got this button here. If we click on that, then we've got some sorting options. So we're going to go to More Sort Options. And I want to display these in descending order based on the sum of sales. And if we press OK, we're actually going to see that they're in an ascending order. So we're starting from the smallest sales up to the largest sales. But if we look at our pivot table, we're going to see that we do actually have a descending order here. So the pivot chart, for some reason, shows the opposite. So we're just going to sort this in ascending order based on sales and press OK. And that way we have it in a descending order for our chart. We're going to do the same thing with this chart here. Let's click on the Sort and Filter toggle, go to More Sort Options, and we're going to do ascending based on the sum of sales and press OK. And we've got that chart sorted as well. And again, if we look at our pivot table, now our customer pivot table is sorted in ascending order. So you can perform the sorting from the pivot table as well, since the pivot tables and pivot charts are linked. So here you can use the Sort and Filter toggle in the pivot table and go to More Sort Options and access the same ascending or descending sort options. Now that we've got those sorted, let's remove some of the junk in our charts here. So if we right click on these buttons, we don't need them anymore. We can hide all field buttons on our chart, and that's going to give us a lot more room. Let's do that for all of our charts. We also can get rid of this legend. So we can select it and press delete in all of our charts. We're also going to remove all the grid lines. So we can select those and press delete as well. And we can remove our axes as well. Let's select those, press delete. And here we're going to format these a bit darker. Let's add some bold formatting. And we're going to update our chart titles. So we can just click into those. And let's change the color of these bars and lines. So let's select them. And if we go up to the Home tab, we can choose any color here. And here I'm going to select this line, right click, and go to Format Data Series. And here under the line option, we're going to change that color. And we're also going to make these bars a little bit thicker. So let's select them, right click, Format Data Series. And here we've got this gap width option. So the larger this number, the bigger the gap between the bars. So let's set this to something like 50%. And lastly, we're going to add some data labels so that we can see the numbers behind these charts. So if we select our charts, we can click on this plus sign here to add chart elements. And here we're going to add some data labels. And if we click over here, we have more options. So here we want to choose outside and on the end to display our labels. And then let's make the chart area a little bit smaller so that we got room for our labels here. We're going to do the same thing with this chart here. Let's click on our chart elements and add data labels outside on the end. And same here. And also let's move that back a little bit so that we got room for our label here. And I'm just going to make this bold. And now we've got some much nicer looking charts than our default pivot charts. Next up, we're going to build our KPI data cards that are going to display our simple KPIs, such as the overall sales. And these are simply going to be a set of shapes that allow us to display a value. So here we're going to go up to the Insert tab and we're going to add a couple shapes. So we're going to use rectangles here. And so first we're going to draw the background for our card. And if we go up to the Shape Format tab, we're going to fill that as white. And we're just going to have a gray border. And then we're going to insert another shape for the heading. And here we're going to have a green color as our fill and no outline. And if we double click on this shape, then we're going to be able to type something in here. And so here I'm just going to type the label that I want, and I'm going to select that, go up to the Home tab, and let's increase that font a little bit, and we're going to center it and maybe give it a bold font as well. And lastly, we're going to insert a shape that's going to contain our value. So let's go to Shapes and add in another rectangle. And now if we select that shape and go up to the formula bar, we can type an equal sign, and now we can reference in our pivot table sheet here one of these values. So first let's do sum of quantity and press OK. And we've got that value displaying in our shape now. Again, let's go to the Home tab and center that value. And up in the Shape Format tab, we're going to remove our fill. So we're going to have no fill here. And we're also going to have no outline. And now I'm just going to select all of those shapes. So if I hold Control, then I'm going to be able to select them all. And up in the Shape Format tab, I'm just going to align these in the center. And then I can group them together so that they don't move around on me. And that is our data card. And now all we need to do is just select it, press Control C, and Control V to create another one. And here we're just going to replace this reference with our next value, so average of sales. And we can also replace our label here. Now let's add in the slicers to our dashboard. So this is the element that's going to make our dashboard interactive. So it's going to allow users to filter the dashboard in an intuitive way. And to do that, we're going to go to our pivot table sheet and select any of our pivot tables. And if we go up to the Analyze tab, then we can insert slicers from here. And in this case, we're going to insert a slicer for our region field, our customer field, and our category field. And when we press OK, then we get slicers for each of those. And we're going to select all of them if we hold Control and select each one. And then we can cut those and paste them into our dashboard sheet. We can also add style to these. So if we select one, go up to the slicer tab, and then we've got these preset selections here. So we can maybe change these to a dark green theme. And we can move and resize these accordingly. And now if we use these to filter, we're going to see that it's actually only connected to our customer pivot chart. And that's because when we created them, we selected our customer pivot table. But you can connect these to any number of pivot charts or pivot tables. And before we do that, we're just going to name our pivot tables so that it makes it easier to tell what we're connecting to. So if we select our pivot table, we can go to the Analyze tab and we can name our pivot tables here. And press Enter, and now our pivot table is named Sales by Customer. Let's name this one. And now let's go to our dashboard and we can right click on any of our slicers and go to the report connections. And this is going to allow us to connect it to any of our pivot tables and pivot charts. So here, our region slicer, we're going to connect it to the sales by customer, sales by month, sales by product, and our sales KPIs. But we're going to leave it unconnected to our sales by region, as filtering on a particular region won't add any information to this chart here. Let's press OK. And we're going to right click and go to report connections for our category slicer. And here we're going to connect it to everything. And press OK. And here, let's right click and go to report connections for our customer slicer. And here we're not going to connect it to our customer chart or pivot table, but let's connect it to everything else. And press OK. And there we've got our simple pivot table based dashboard that's interactive and allows us to filter on different regions, different categories, or different customers. If you want to dive deeper into pivot tables, then check out my pivot table masterclass, as well as my dashboard template exercise pack, which is going to allow you to practice building dashboards based on pivot tables with 3 templates that include full instructions. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel for future Excel videos like this one, and we'll see you in the next video.